When God builds a man, the process is not easy, not glamorous, and certainly not comfortable. It is the most sacred construction project in the universe, one that takes place not in temples or workshops, but within the heart of a man who dares to surrender to God's hands. Every man God has ever used mightily was first broken deeply. Every great purpose was forged in hidden places. The call of God is not a crown placed on your head overnight. It is a journey through deserts, storms, and fire until everything that is not of Him is stripped away. When God begins to build a man, He starts with disruption, not comfort. He shakes the foundations of what you think you know and tears apart the illusion of control. Abraham's journey began when God told him to leave everything familiar. Joseph's began when he was betrayed and cast into a pit. David's began when he was anointed king but sent back to care for sheep. Each of these men was called before they were crowned. The call always precedes the crown, and the space between the two is where God does His greatest work. The call is not always thunder from the sky. Sometimes it's a whisper that won't leave your spirit, a stirring that keeps you awake at night. It's not about what you can do, but about what God plans to do through you. The moment the call comes, opposition awakens. Hell trembles when God marks a man for destiny. Yet that call is only the seed. It must be buried, hidden, and watered in tears before it grows. When God calls you, He doesn't look at your resources. He looks at what He placed inside you. That call may feel far from fulfillment, but it's heaven's announcement that purpose has begun to unfold. After the call comes the wilderness. Every man who carries destiny must first be shaped by solitude. The wilderness is where comfort dies and dependence is born. It's a classroom without walls, where faith is tested and character is forged. Israel had to endure it before reaching the promised land, because freedom without faith would have destroyed them. Joseph endured his wilderness in the darkness of a prison. He entered it as a dreamer and emerged as a leader ready to rule. Even Jesus Himself faced 40 days of silence and temptation before His ministry began. If the Son of God had to be tested, how can any of us expect exemption? The wilderness strips away every false support until you realize that God alone is enough. It teaches you to trust the invisible, to walk when you cannot see. The wilderness may feel like abandonment, but it is the preparation that builds strength you will need later. When you emerge, your faith will not be fragile. It will be unshakable. Then comes the breaking. No man is truly useful to God until he has been broken. It is not punishment, but transformation. Jacob learned this the night he wrestled with God and limped away, changed forever. Peter learned it when he denied Jesus and wept bitterly. In the breaking, pride is crushed and self-reliance dies. God does not break you to destroy you. He breaks you to rebuild you on the foundation of surrender. The unbroken man is a danger to himself and others. He carries too much of his own ambition. But the man who has been broken in God's hands carries humility, wisdom, and dependence that make him safe to use. In the breaking, you lose what you thought defined you, but you gain what truly does: grace, compassion, and divine strength. After the breaking, God turns up the heat, the refining fire of trials. The fire is where impurities are burned away and motives are purified. It is not meant to destroy you, but to expose what is real. Gold cannot be refined without fire, and faith cannot be proven without pain. The furnace moments of life, betrayal, loss, illness, rejection, are where God reveals His presence most vividly. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego met God in the flames, not outside them. The fire burned away their bonds, not their bodies. Job, too, discovered this truth, declaring that when God tests him, he will come forth as gold. The refining process hurts because it reveals the parts of you that cannot remain. It teaches you to worship in the flames, to trust God when there's no evidence of His hand. The man who comes out of the fire does not emerge the same. He comes out with a faith that cannot be shaken and a character that cannot be bought. Then begins the long, quiet shaping of character. This stage is slow, subtle, and often hidden. God takes his time here because gifting without character can destroy you. David knew this in the caves where he hid from Saul. Though he had a crown in his spirit, he had to learn restraint and mercy before wearing it on his head. God used those hidden years to shape him into a king who would rule with integrity. Joseph's shaping happened in the darkness of false accusation, where forgiveness was carved into his soul. When his moment of power finally came, he wept instead of retaliating. Paul's shaping took place in obscurity, years after his conversion, learning and unlearning before he became the great apostle. Character is built through unseen choices. Telling the truth when lying would be easier, choosing faith when fear is louder, loving when you've been wronged. God chisels slowly because he is not creating a momentary success story. He is forming an eternal testimony. Pain becomes the final tool in God's construction. Pain is never wasted in his hands. It becomes the birthplace of purpose. The very thing meant to destroy you becomes the thing that defines your destiny. Joseph's betrayal positioned him for Egypt. Paul's thorn kept him humble and dependent on grace. Even Jesus' suffering became the means of salvation. Pain, when surrendered to God, becomes the chisel that shapes compassion, empathy, and endurance. It gives you eyes to see others who suffer and strength to help them through. Pain refines your voice so that when you speak healing. The devil wants you to see your pain as proof that God has abandoned you. But in truth, it's proof that God is preparing you. Every wound becomes a doorway to ministry, every scar a testimony of grace. God does not waste suffering, he redeems it. When the process is complete, when the man has been called, tested, broken, refined, shaped, and purified, God unveils his work. The man God finally uses is not the loudest, not the most talented, not the most confident. He is the most surrendered. Moses spent 80 years being shaped before leading Israel. By the time God sent him, he was no longer the self-assured prince, but a humble shepherd. David rose from caves to the throne, not through ambition, but through obedience. Joseph rose from the pit to the palace, not through revenge, but through forgiveness. Peter, once afraid of rejection, became fearless in preaching the gospel. Every man who endured the process emerged, carrying something greater than position. He carried the presence of God. The man God uses stands not in his strength, but in divine power. He speaks not for attention, but for transformation. He leads not for recognition, but for redemption. When people look at him, they don't see perfection. They see grace. They see a vessel once cracked and crushed, now shining with the glory of God. This is what happens when God builds a man. The storms, the silence, the breaking, the fire, the pain, all of it was never random. It was the master craftsman's design. The same hands that pressed you were the ones protecting you. The same moments that broke you were the ones preparing you. God's process is slow but sure. He builds men not for applause but for eternity. And when his work is revealed, the world no longer sees the cracks of your breaking. They see the glory that shines through them.